The soft morning light filtered through the curtains as Sarah stirred in bed, her hand instinctively reaching out for Jake's side of the mattress. It was cold. She sighed, not out of annoyance, but resignation. Jake's early morning runs had become a regular occurrence over the past few months. At first, she admired his commitment to fitness, but lately, the timing of these runs felt convenient. Too convenient. The house was quiet except for the faint hum of the refrigerator. Sarah pulled herself out of bed, tying her robe around her waist as she padded to the kitchen. The coffee maker bubbled to life, its aroma filling the air. On the counter was Jake's water bottle, abandoned and half full, a detail that struck her as odd. Jake never forgot his bottle, especially on a run. Sarah brushed the thought aside, chalking it up to a busy mind. Yet, the unease she had been feeling for weeks lingered, a quiet whisper in the back of her mind. Sarah and Jake had been married for 8 years. Their relationship had its ups and downs, but Sarah always believed their foundation was solid. Jake was charismatic and dependable, a man who could make anyone feel at ease. Yet over the past few months, Sarah noticed subtle shifts in his behavior. Jake was coming home later than usual, his explanations vague and hurried. His phone, once casually left on the coffee table, now never left his pocket. When she asked, he laughed it off, saying she was being paranoid. "You're overthinking, babe," he'd say with a grin, kissing her forehead. Sarah wanted to believe him. She wanted to believe that the distance between them was a figment of her imagination. But there were signs, too many to ignore. The house was their sanctuary, a modest but cozy 2-story home in a quiet neighborhood. Sarah had poured her heart into decorating it, making it their own. But now, the house felt different, as if it were hiding secrets. One afternoon, Sarah noticed the guest room door slightly ajar. They rarely used it, and she had cleaned it just days ago. Yet, there was a faint scent of perfume in the air, not hers. She frowned, stepping inside. The bed was made, but there was a small crease in the sheets, as if someone had sat there. Her heart began to race. "Jake?" she called out, her voice echoing through the house. No response. She brushed it off, convincing herself it was her imagination. But the perfume lingered, and so did her doubts. Later that week, Sarah found a hairpin on the bathroom counter. It wasn't hers. She stared at it for a long moment, the sleek black pin sitting there like a puzzle piece she couldn't place. "Maybe it's from a guest," she muttered, but the explanation felt hollow. Her unease grew. Jake's mood swings, his evasiveness, and now these small, inexplicable details, they all pointed to something being off. Sarah began paying closer attention to Jake's routines. His so-called runs were suspiciously timed, and he always seemed more tired than a simple jog could explain. One evening, as they sat in the living room watching TV, Jake's phone buzzed. He glanced at it, his expression unreadable, then quickly put it face down. "Who was that?" Sarah asked, keeping her tone casual. "Work," Jake replied, not meeting her gaze. "Work at 9 p.m.? Sarah didn't push further, but her mind was spinning. It was a sleepless night when Sarah made her decision. She couldn't shake the feeling that something was happening behind her back, something Jake wasn't telling her. She needed answers. The next morning, while Jake was out, Sarah ordered a set of discreet cameras online. She felt a pang of guilt. Spying on her husband felt wrong, but her need for the truth outweighed her hesitation. As the cameras arrived days later, Sarah set them up meticulously. She placed one in the guest room, one in the living room, and another near the back door. Each angle was carefully chosen, ensuring that nothing would escape her view. The weight of her actions pressed on her, but Sarah told herself it was necessary. If Jake was hiding something, or someone she needed to know. The first few days after installing the cameras, Sarah felt a mix of anticipation and dread. She went about her daily routine, trying not to let her suspicions consume her. Yet each moment alone in the house felt heavier, as if the walls themselves held secrets. One evening, Sarah sat at her laptop reviewing the footage. The cameras hadn't caught much, just Jake entering and leaving the house at odd hours. But then, something unusual happened. Sarah had always been meticulous about their home. Every room, every drawer, Every cabinet had its place. So when she noticed the guest room door locked one afternoon, her heart skipped a beat. Jake, she called, though she knew he wasn't home. She jiggled the handle again, but it didn't budge. This was strange. Why would the guest room, of all places, be locked? She retrieved a spare key from the kitchen drawer and unlocked it, her pulse racing. The room looked untouched at first glance. The bed was neatly made, the curtains drawn. But something felt off. The air smelled faintly of the same unfamiliar perfume she'd noticed earlier. On the bedside table was a half-empty glass of water. Sarah's stomach churned. She backed out of the room and locked the door behind her, the questions in her mind multiplying. The next day, Sarah bumped into her neighbor, Mrs. Cooper, while watering the front lawn. "You've had a lot of visitors lately," Mrs. Cooper remarked casually. Sarah froze. "Visitors?" Mrs. Cooper nodded. "Yes, I saw a woman coming out of your house a few days ago. I assumed she was a friend of yours." Sarah forced a smile, her mind reeling. "Oh, must have been one of Jake's colleagues." Mrs. Cooper's brow furrowed, but she didn't press further. Sarah excused herself and hurried back inside, her heart pounding. Who was this woman? And why had Jake never mentioned her? That evening, Jake came home later than usual. He was distracted, barely engaging in their usual small talk. After dinner, he retreated to the living room, his phone glued to his hand. Sarah watched from the kitchen, pretending to clean. She could hear snippets of his conversation, though his tone was hushed. "I told you it's fine." "No, she doesn't know. Just stay put." Her hands tightened around the dishcloth, her nails digging into the fabric. Who was he talking to? And what didn't she know? Unable to wait any longer, Sarah retrieved the camera footage from the guest room. She watched with bated breath as the screen showed an empty room for most of the day. But then, around noon, the door creaked open. A woman stepped inside. Sarah's heart dropped. The woman was tall, with dark hair tied back into a sleek ponytail. She moved with familiarity, as though she belonged there. She sat on the bed, scrolling through her phone, before lying down as if she were home. The timestamp on the footage aligned with when Jake was supposed to be at work. Sarah felt a storm brewing inside her. She wanted to confront Jake immediately, to demand answers, but something held her back. What if there was more? What if this woman wasn't just a casual visitor? She confided in her best friend, Emily, the next day. "Are you sure about this?" Emily asked, her voice filled with concern. "It could be a misunderstanding." Sarah shook her head. "I have footage, Emily. She's in our house, our guest room. Jake's hiding something, and I need to know what it is." Emily placed a hand on Sarah's. "Then gather as much evidence as you can. If he's lying, you deserve the truth." Over the next week, Sarah kept her suspicions to herself, acting as though everything was normal. She continued reviewing the camera footage, each day uncovering more damning evidence. The woman, Jake's ex, Sarah realized, wasn't just visiting. She was staying there. Clothes appeared in the closet that didn't belong to Sarah. A pair of heels was tucked neatly under the bed. Sarah's emotions swung wildly between fury and heartbreak. How could Jake do this to her? How long had this been going on? One evening, Sarah decided to test Jake's reaction. "Have you talked to Lisa recently?" she asked casually, referring to his ex. Jake stiffened, his fork pausing midair. "Why would you ask that?" "Just curious," Sarah replied, her tone light. Jake forced a laugh. "No, I haven't spoken to her in years." The lie was so blatant, so effortless, that Sarah felt her anger bubbling to the surface. She bit her tongue, knowing she couldn't reveal what she knew. Not yet. Sarah's breaking point came when she reviewed footage from the living room camera. The woman was there again, sitting on the couch with Jake. They were laughing, their body language intimate. Jake leaned closer, brushing a strand of hair from her face. Sarah's vision blurred with tears. This wasn't just betrayal, it was a deliberate, calculated deception. She decided she couldn't wait any longer. The truth had to come out, and it had to be public. The footage played out on Sarah's laptop screen, pixel by pixel unraveling the threads of her life. It was late at night, and the house was silent except for the faint hum of the refrigerator. On the screen, the guest room door opened again, and Lisa, the woman Sarah now knew as Jake's ex, walked in. But this time, she wasn't alone. Jake followed her, carrying a tray with 2 cups of coffee. They sat on the bed, their conversation inaudible, but their body language unmistakable. Lisa reached out, brushing her fingers against Jake's hand. He didn't pull away. Instead, he smiled. A soft, intimate smile that Sarah hadn't seen in months. Her heart pounded in her chest, each beat reverberating like thunder. She clenched her fists, tears streaming down her face. This wasn't just betrayal. It was a violation of everything they had built together. Sarah stared at the screen long after the footage ended. The image of Jake and Lisa burned into her mind. Her grief morphed into something sharper, something more resolute. She wasn't going to confront Jake in private. No, this needed to be exposed publicly, where he couldn't twist the narrative or manipulate her into silence. An idea began to form. A family dinner scheduled for the weekend. It was the perfect opportunity. Everyone would be there: Jake's parents, her best friend Emily, and a few close relatives. Sarah spent the next 2 days preparing. She downloaded the damning footage and edited it into a short, undeniable sequence. She rehearsed what she would say, how she would hold her ground. The dining room was alive with chatter and laughter as the family gathered around the table. Jake was in his element, charming as ever, telling a story about a project at work. Sarah sat silently, her expression calm but her heart racing. As dessert was served, she cleared her throat. "I have something I want to share with everyone." The room quieted. Jake glanced at her, puzzled. "Is everything okay?" he asked, his tone laced with concern. Sarah met his gaze, her voice steady. "Not really, Jake. But I think it's time everyone knows the truth." She reached for her laptop, which she had placed on a side table earlier. With a few clicks, the footage began playing on the TV screen. The room fell silent as the video showed Lisa entering their home. Gasps echoed when Jake appeared on the screen, carrying coffee into the guest room. His interactions with Lisa left no room for doubt. Jake's face turned ashen. "Sarah, what is this?" he stammered, his voice shaking. "It's the truth, Jake," Sarah said, her voice unwavering. "The truth you've been hiding from me and everyone else here." Lisa's face appeared on the screen again, and Jake jumped to his feet, trying to turn off the TV. Sarah blocked him, her voice rising. "Sit down, Jake," she demanded. "You owe me and everyone here an explanation." The room erupted into chaos. Jake's mother gasped, clutching her chest, while his father shook his head in disbelief. Emily stood frozen, her hand over her mouth. Jake tried to regain control. "Sarah, please." "It's not what it looks like." "Not what it looks like." Sarah shot back, her voice trembling with emotion. "You've been sneaking her into our house, our home, lying to me, disrespecting me, and thinking you could get away with it." Jake's parents turned to him, their expressions a mixture of disappointment and anger. "Jake, what the hell is going on?" his father demanded. Jake's composure cracked. "It's not like that," he said weakly. "She needed a place to stay. I was just helping her out." "Helping her out?" Sarah repeated, her voice dripping with sarcasm. "By sneaking her into our home, lying to me, and hiding her in the guest room? Do you think I'm stupid?" As if on cue, there was a knock at the door. Sarah froze. Jake's eyes widened in panic. "Who's that?" Emily asked. Jake bolted for the door, but Sarah was faster. She opened it to reveal Lisa, standing on the porch, looking flustered. The room behind Sarah went silent again as Lisa stepped inside, her gaze darting nervously between Jake and Sarah. "Lisa," Sarah said, her tone icy. "Since you're already here, why don't you join us?" Jake was just explaining why he thought it was okay to hide you in our house. Lisa stammered, I didn't mean to cause trouble." Jake said it was fine. "Enough," Sarah interrupted. "You both made your choices. and now you get to face the consequences. Jake tried to salvage the situation, but the damage was done. His parents berated him for his dishonesty. Emily pulled Sarah aside, tears in her eyes, apologizing for not believing her sooner. Sarah stood in the center of the chaos, her emotions swirling. She felt pain, betrayal, and anger, but also an overwhelming sense of relief. The truth was out. She had faced it head on, refusing to be silenced or manipulated. "Jake," Sarah said finally, her voice cutting through the noise. "We're done. I'll be contacting a lawyer tomorrow." Jake's face crumpled. "Sarah, please." "No," she said firmly. "You made your choice when you betrayed me. Now you can live with it." She turned and walked out of the room, her head held high. The air in the house was heavy, even though the confrontation had ended hours ago. Sarah sat on the edge of her bed, staring at the framed photo of her and Jake from their honeymoon. It felt like a relic from another life, a cruel reminder of a promise shattered beyond repair. She replayed the events of the evening in her mind, the gasps of her in-laws, Jake's desperate attempts to explain, Lisa's stammering apologies. But the most vivid moment was her own voice, steady and resolute, declaring that she was done. The following morning, Jake approached her cautiously, his eyes red from what she could only assume was a sleepless night. "Sarah," he began, his voice hoarse, "I made a mistake. I know I hurt you, and I'll do whatever it takes to fix this. Please don't give up on us." Sarah looked at him, her expression unreadable. She wanted to scream, to ask how he could have done this to her, but she had already spent too much energy on him. "You didn't make a mistake, Jake," she said finally. "You made a series of choices, deliberate, calculated choices. And now, we both have to live with the consequences." Jake sank onto the couch, burying his face in his hands. "I was trying to help her," he mumbled. "She was going through a hard time. I didn't mean for it to get out of hand." Sarah shook her head. "You didn't mean for me to find out. That's the only thing you regret." Lisa left the house the same day. Sarah didn't see her leave, but Emily later confirmed that she'd spotted her loading a suitcase into a cab. Emily's voice was filled with disdain. "She had the nerve to call you stronger than she expected. Can you believe that?" Sarah gave a bitter laugh. "She doesn't get to have an opinion about me." Lisa's departure brought a strange sense of closure. She was no longer a physical presence in Sarah's life, but the emotional wreckage she'd left behind would take much longer to clean up. The fallout from the confrontation rippled through their social circle. Jake's parents, deeply embarrassed by their son's actions, called Sarah to apologize. "You didn't deserve this, Sarah," his mother said tearfully. "We raised him better than this." Sarah appreciated their support, but felt no obligation to smooth things over for their sake. "I need time to figure out what's next," she replied, keeping the conversation brief. Jake's father, on the other hand, was blunt. "If you're done with him, you're right to walk away. He has to learn that actions have consequences." Sarah decided to take control of her life, starting with the house. She filed for divorce and began making plans to sell the property. Every corner of the house was tainted with memories of Jake's deceit, and she couldn't bear to stay there. Packing up her belongings felt like peeling away layers of herself. Painful, but necessary. As she sorted through their shared life, she found moments of clarity, realizing how much of herself she had compromised over the years to keep the marriage afloat. Emily became Sarah's rock during this time, spending countless evenings with her over glasses of wine and takeout. "You've always been stronger than you think," Emily told her one night. "This didn't break you. It revealed how resilient you are." Sarah nodded, though she wasn't sure she fully believed it yet. But having Emily by her side made the journey less lonely. Her wider circle of friends rallied around her as well, offering support and encouragement. Some share their own stories of betrayal and recovery, reminding Sarah that she wasn't alone. Jake, however, wasn't ready to let go. He sent flowers, left voicemails, and even showed up unannounced a few times. Each time, Sarah met him with the same calm resolve. "This isn't about hate, Jake," she told him during one of their last conversations. "It's about knowing my worth, and I deserve better than what you gave me." Jake finally stopped reaching out, though Sarah suspected it was more out of resignation than acceptance. As the weeks turned into months, Sarah began to rediscover herself. She joined a local book club, something she'd always wanted to do but had never found time for. She started painting again, filling her apartment with bright, bold colors that reflected her evolving state of mind. She also began seeing a therapist, someone who helped her process the complex emotions of betrayal and loss. Through these sessions, Sarah learned to let go of the guilt she had carried. Guilt for not seeing the signs earlier, for trusting too easily, for not being enough to keep Jake faithful. It wasn't about you, her therapist reminded her. It was about his choices, his flaws, not yours. One evening, as Sarah sat on her balcony watching the sunset, she felt a sense of peace she hadn't experienced in months. The pain was still there, but it was no longer all-consuming. She thought back to the confrontation, the moment she had taken control of her narrative. It hadn't been easy, but it had been necessary. And now, for the first time in a long time, she felt free. She picked up her journal and wrote the words she had been afraid to believe. I am stronger than this. I will rise again. The day Sarah finalized the sale of the house, she stood in the now empty living room, a bittersweet smile on her face. The space, once filled with memories of love and betrayal, felt like a shell of her former life. The walls seemed to echo with a quiet farewell, a closing chapter in a story that had consumed her for so long. As the new owners pulled up to the driveway, Sarah handed them the keys and wished them well. This place deserves a fresh start, she said, surprising even herself with the warmth in her voice. Walking away from the house felt symbolic, a definitive step toward reclaiming her life. She didn't glance back as she drove away, the weight of the past lifting with every mile. A week later, Jake reached out one last time. This time, it wasn't a plea for reconciliation, but an apology. They met at a small cafe, a neutral space that felt safer than the intimacy of their old home. Jake looked tired, his once confident demeanor replaced by a quiet humility. I just wanted to say I'm sorry, he began. Not just for what I did, but for how I hurt you. You didn't deserve any of it. Sarah listened, her heart surprisingly calm. I appreciate that, she replied. But this isn't about forgiving you for your sake. It's about freeing myself from what you did. I won't let your choices define me anymore. Jake nodded, his eyes brimming with regret. You've always been stronger than me, he said softly. Sarah smiled, a genuine, unburdened smile. I've learned to be. With the house sold and the divorce finalized, Sarah moved into a cozy apartment closer to the city. It wasn't as spacious or luxurious as the home she had shared with Jake, but it felt more like her own. She decorated it with vibrant colors, filling the space with artwork and plants that brought her joy. Her days were filled with new activities, morning runs in the park, cooking classes, and volunteering at a local shelter. She reconnected with old friends and made new ones, building a support system that celebrated her independence and strength. One evening, while attending a gallery opening, Sarah met someone. His name was David, an artist with a quiet confidence and an easy smile. They struck up a conversation about one of the paintings, and for the first time in what felt like forever, Sarah felt a spark. Not the desperate, all-consuming kind she had once mistaken for love, but a steady, warm connection. David didn't rush her, didn't push. He respected her boundaries and seemed genuinely interested in who she was, not as someone's wife or someone recovering from betrayal, but as Sarah. One night, as she journaled by candlelight, Sarah reflected on how far she had come. The pain of Jake's betrayal had been overwhelming, but it had also been transformative. It forced her to look inward, to reevaluate her worth and priorities. I used to think love was about sacrifice, she wrote, but now I know it's about balance, about giving and receiving equally without losing yourself in the process. She closed the journal, feeling a sense of peace she hadn't known before. The next morning, Sarah met Emily for coffee. As they chatted, Emily asked, "Do you ever regret finding out the truth?" Sarah paused, considering the question. It was painful, she admitted, but it was necessary. Living in ignorance might have felt safer, but it wouldn't have been real. I needed to face the truth to find myself again. Emily nodded. You're stronger now, she said. Not stronger, Sarah corrected, smiling. Just more aware of what I deserve. As Sarah walked back to her apartment, the sun broke through the clouds, bathing the city streets in golden light. For the first time in years, the future felt open, unwritten, and full of possibility. She didn't know where her journey would lead, but she knew she would face it with courage and clarity. She had survived betrayal, rediscovered her strength, and reclaimed her life. And that, she realized, was more than enough.